Masked paper bag person surveils my husband and I. So this only happened yesterday, and it's been driving me crazy. It's not a wild story, not as wild as the other stories on here, but it's by far one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me. So my husband and I are walking home after having a beer at a local pub at around 6 p.m. In terms of setting the scene, we live in a small town in New Zealand, top population of 2,000. We have a real mixed bag in terms of residents: old folk, meth heads, low-income earners, and increasingly commuters from our capital city have been settling here. We fall into the latter category. It's spring here, so was still plenty of light, and we were all just chatting as we walked the 10 minutes or so home. About 3 minutes into the walk, at the first intersection, I spot a cat sitting on the fence of one of the corner houses on the other side of the street from us. I say meow, and it meows back. It then starts stalking a bird, so my husband and I continue watching this house, the cat really, as we walk past. Suddenly a person with a brown paper bag mask on their head kind of stumbles out of the front door of this house into the yard. Their mannerisms and how they're moving is so strange, but not what I'd associate with being drunk. The house itself seemed completely dead, so there's no party or anything. The person then turns to us and makes eye contact. Well, the eye holes in the mask are staring at us, and then starts slowly backing away into the front door alcove of the house and disappears from view into the alcove. We've been slowly walking this whole time, and at this point I have literal goosebumps and an intense sense of dread. When I write it down, it sounds so silly, but there was something so creepy about this person. We're still looking as we walk past the house, and the paper bag face slowly emerges from the alcove, watching us before disappearing from view again. As we walk and get further and further away, we keep turning around to look, and the same happens over and over again. Nothing, and then slowly but surely, the paper bag face emerges out to watch us. This continued until we were at the end of the street, some 350 meters, and rounded the corner out of sight. It still makes my skin crawl thinking about it. My husband laughed and said it was probably some kid getting ready for Halloween or fucking with us, and he's probably right, but I had to keep turning around to watch my back, and I did that for the whole walk home. I mean, I was pretty creeped out. Ex-murderer in New Zealand. So, my mum is from New Zealand and my dad is Australian, as am I. I was born here, but soon after I was born, probably 6 months, my mum took me to Christchurch so all of her friends and family could meet me. My dad worked in the mines, fly in, fly out, so I don't think he came with us. We stayed at my grandmother's house. One night, my grandmother decided to go to bingo, so Mum stayed at home and looked after the baby me. Their neighborhood was apparently pretty quiet. Neighbors knew each other and got on well enough. Mum is in the bedroom with me, light on, but I'm fast asleep. Everything is quiet as usual as it gets darker outside. At this point, my grandmother should be back soon. To set the scene, there's our house, the guy who lives alone next door, and the female with a teenage daughter across the road. Mum hears a commotion, sirens, and goes outside to check it. The whole neighborhood is out by now. Everything is confusing. The man next door is being arrested, and the teenage girl across the road is a mess. My mum wonders what happened. Mum had to wait for gossip and followed media stories to find out everything. The man next door was mentally ill, likely with schizophrenia, and heard a voice telling him to go to that house with the light on and kill the people inside. He took his axe, crossed the road, and then knocked on the door. The girl's dad greeted him, and when he realized something was wrong, he tried to turn and run, which resulted in him being struck in the skull with the axe. He then attacked the mum, eventually hitting her in the back with the axe. I can't remember if she died or was paralyzed. The daughter called the police. This is 1995, so I'm fairly sure she would have had to call pretty quickly as the line was still corded. And then she ran. She managed to make it out onto the street and scream for help. The police arrested the guy and locked him up, but Mum always likes to remind me of how everything would have gone if he had turned left towards the light in our room instead of crossing the road. She still has the old newspaper clippings from the whole ordeal. Hey everyone, Grimm here. Just a quick analogue here. If you're interested in me reading the true crime that was this story, let me know in the comments below and I'll add it to another true crime video later on. r/letsnotmeet saved me from a predator. To put this into context, I am an 18-year-old girl living in New Zealand. I suffer from anxiety and shut down in stressful situations and become rather overwhelmed when I'm not sure how to deal with something. This story happened yesterday whilst I was awaiting my bus at the station, trying to get home. I had a long day at work, my legs were in pain, and all I wanted to do was get home and watch some YouTube in bed. It was getting dark and the sun was almost completely down. As I was listening to some music in a rather deserted area of the bus station, a man considerably larger than myself wandered up and sat down directly next to me at the bench, which I didn't think too much of. To put this into perspective, I am roughly 55 kgs. He must have been at least 100 and could have easily overpowered me. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that this man was staring at me and began to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but pegged it up to him looking at my mask, although it is rather non-descriptive and just black. I ignored this and acted busy on my phone to avoid talking. As I said, I had a very long day at work. The man began to talk to me, and I pulled out my AirPod to listen to what he was saying. The AirPod fell out of my hand and landed on the ground, to which he picked it up for me. He held onto it and stared at it for a few seconds before handing it back to me. I was already getting bad vibes from this man. The conversation went something like this. "Your eyes are so beautiful. Did you get them from your mum or your dad?" My mum, I guess. I kept my replies short, to try to signify that I wasn't in the mood for talking, but he continued. "What bus are you catching? Where do you live?" I laughed nervously and told him I didn't feel very comfortable sharing where I lived, but I told him that I was further up north. He then said, "Why? It's not like I'm going to grape you. Isn't it really fancy up there?" This was where I began to feel seriously uncomfortable and began to shake. He asked if I had a boyfriend, to which I said yes. He then proceeded to ask if I planned to marry him, to which I laughed and said yes. "Oh, it kinda sounds like you're just rooting him. Are you sure you want to marry him?" I was shocked and looked at him before telling him yes once more and that I do plan to marry my partner. He then asked how old I was. I don't know what came over me, but I told him that I was 21 to try to make it come across that I was old enough to stand up for myself. He then asked if I was on the pill. I replied, "I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable sharing that, and I don't see why you need to know that either." He then replied, "Oh, so you use condoms instead, eh?" I wanted to walk away, but I was grounded to the bench, and I couldn't move a muscle if I tried. I was uncomfortable and confused as to why he was asking these questions. He then asked, "Do you have someone waiting for you at the bus stop, or are you walking home? How far do you live from the bus stop?" This is the question that made everything click into place. I realized this guy has malicious intent. He's not being friendly. This man is going to follow me home and either grape me or kidnap me. I started to really panic and started desperately looking for onlookers. A young man, possibly my age, walked out of one of the public bathrooms last and had overheard this conversation and was looking at the predator rather skeptically. I knew then I'd at least have someone to help if I just asked for it. I didn't. By this point, I recalled a video from r/ about a highly pregnant woman and her daughter being followed to their car in an empty car park in the dark by an older man. This lady was stressfully trying to find her keys in her purse, and this man standing beside her daughters on the opposite side of the car making small talk with them. He got impatient and had walked away before she found her keys. Someone had commented on her submission saying this was a popular thing, that he was waiting for her to unlock the car so he could get in and control her via threats of her children. It occurred to me that I should skip my bus and catch another one, At a later time, I did this exactly. He kept trying to ask where I lived, and I continued to refuse telling him where. He also continued to ask how far I lived from the stop and if my partner was waiting for me. I deflected as many questions as I could. 40 minutes later, he began to get quite grumpy and walked away from the station. He wasn't there to catch a bus at all, but to prey on a young woman at the bus stop. I caught my bus about 10 minutes after he left, and I ran home, where I completely broke down and cried into the arms of my partner. This morning I was so stressed, I contemplated taking the day off work and staying in bed to rest for the day. I was petrified. Just so you know, I didn't take the day off. I'm currently at work posting this. Stoner's intuition. As a wild teenager, I had my fair share of lucky misses. This one in particular scared me to my core. I was at a friend's house one evening. We were all getting stoned and drinking. You know, stupid teenage stuff. I was wearing a white miniskirt, a glittery hatter top, and knee-high white-heeled boots. Yes, I was that girl. At around 12 a.m. I knew I had to go home, but there was no one sober enough to drive me. I asked my friends for a hoodie and some pants, and then I decided to walk the 30-plus minutes to my house alone. I had done this walk many times, so it felt safe enough to do so, except I hadn't done it at midnight, alone. Within the first 10 minutes, I passed the main intersection with no issues, and as I am about to walk around the corner down the main road into my area, a large green van pulls up beside me. Me being stoned and paranoid, my fingers automatically dial 111, the New Zealand police number. As I dialed the police, a young islander man jumped out of the passenger seat and yelled at me to get in the van. At this very moment, I had my phone to my ear and the operator picked up and asked, "Fire, ambulance, or police?" I replied, "Police, please." Upon hearing this, the young man jumped back into the van and they sped off down the road. I continued to tell the operator a man just tried to get me to his van and that I was stoned walking home. I ended the phone call because I knew I needed to keep my battery from dying, as I still had 20+ minutes to go before I reached my house. At this point, I'm terrified and my stoner's paranoia is at an all-time high. I mean, like, all-time high. This is a long straight road with only 2 bends in it. However, you can see most of the road from anywhere on the footpath. After the van incident, I started to jump into driveways and hide behind bushes whenever I saw headlights. After doing this consistently for about 15 minutes, I started noticing a white sedan had passed at least 3 times. Thinking I must be seeing things, I continued to hide whenever I see headlights and make my way closer to my street. I finally reached the empty paddock opposite the primary school, and I saw headlights again. Thinking on my feet, I quickly jumped over the 6-foot-high fence into the open paddock. There was a massive tree in the middle of the paddock, so I ran and hid behind it. A minute or so later, the white Toyota sedan pulled over directly in front of the paddock fence, and out jumped 5 fully grown men. The first thing they said was, "Where is she? Where is she?" They started searching the street for me and were peering over the fence into the paddock. I panicked, absolutely shitting myself, and dialed the police. Once I got the operator, I just keep repeating my name, address, and current location. The operator finally calmed me down enough to ask me what was happening, and I told her that 5 men in a white sedan were out in the street searching for me as if they wanted to kidnap me. I knew that they were looking for me as I was the only person walking the street at night, alone at that time. She told me the police were on their way and to remain hidden. Finally, I heard the police sirens. What felt like an eternity later, but was probably only about 5 minutes. They drove straight past the men and they all scattered back to the car and fled. By this time, I'm pretty sure I nearly wet myself, and I'm bawling my eyes out to the operator saying they drove straight past. Suddenly, I hear a man saying, "Hello, excuse me girl, are you okay?" I went silent. The man said, "Were those men looking for you? I live across the street and I could hear you crying." I peered out from behind the tree and said, "Yes. Are they gone now?" He said, "Yeah, when the police went past, they fled." He then offered to take me to his house and keep me safe until the police came, so I hung up on the operator and climbed the fence and went to this guy's garage. He was a lovely guy, was just working on his car in the garage, a few doors down from the paddock. He offered me a warm drink and a cigarette to calm my nerves. After 10 minutes, it was evident that the police weren't coming, so he offered to drop me home. All I can say is at that age, I was young, dumb, and definitely would have gotten kidnapped if I wasn't a paranoid stoner with a true crime passion. Anyway, stay weird, stay safe, and happy holidays. The selfie strategy. For context, I am a 22-year-old bio female living in New Zealand. This incident happened about a year ago. My city is fairly safe. Of course, nowhere is perfect, but there isn't anything to worry about here. So it's normal for me to go out on a Saturday night and do some video gaming with my friends and then catch a bus home after midnight. So it's about 1 a.m. and I'm on the bus home. I'm sitting in one row from the back on the right side, and there is another guy sitting across from me on the left side. The windows are tinted black, so I can't see outside very well because it's dark, but I can see my reflection and subsequently where he is sitting and what he is doing perfectly. That's when I notice he's taking a selfie. But he's doing that to be inconspicuous. He's got his back towards me, holding the phone up high, so to anyone else it could be interpreted as a selfie. But by looking at the reflection of his phone screen, it was a photo of me. I turn to him as he snaps a pic and announce loudly for the other passengers to hear, "Do you not want to take pictures of me, a stranger?" He laughed and mumbled something. The other passengers hear this and turn, but soon go back to their own selves. I turn away again, this time putting on the hood of my hoodie. I've got my mother's number on my phone in my pocket, on the button ready to call. I think I'm rather street smart and don't usually get this jumpy, but the way he laughed at me, drawing attention to his creepy behavior, made me unsettled. He leans over to be closer to where I'm sitting and says, "So, you live in suburb of bus destination?" I once again raise my voice so others can hear. "Stop talking to me." Again, he laughs. At this point, I'm freaking out that we're getting closer to my stop and he's going to follow me. The way the suburb is laid out means I can't take detours to try to lose him, nor are there any shops open after midnight for me to run into. Thanks to some sort of miracle, he gets off 2 bus stops before mine. He stands up, places his hand on my shoulder and says, "Have a good night." I snap back very loudly, "Don't bloody touch me." And for a final creepy time, he laughs and smiles as he walks out of the bus door. I went home, proceeded to call Mum while I was shaking and fill her in. Somewhere out there is a selfie with me in the background, looking irritated and slightly concerned. So, creepy selfie bus guy, let's not meet again. Approached by armed creeper on a rural track. I've just recently discovered the subreddit, and I have a story to share that has really traumatized me for quite a while now, and I feel this is a good place to share it. And it will be my first big Reddit post. A lot of these posts on the subreddit are from America or Canada, so I feel for context it's important to let you know that I am from Aotearoa, New Zealand. We do have the odd missing person or scary case, but otherwise it is safe here, and not much happens. I mean that in a way that as a 19-year-old girl, I feel comfortable to walk the streets at night or go hiking alone because it's pretty safe and everybody looks out for one another, generally. This happened in the summer of 2019. I will link a location so you can better understand and hopefully get some photos if I can find them online. My boyfriend and I were heading out on a picnic date to a spot we had visited before plenty of times, the Karakariki track. It is at the end of a very windy rural farm road off the state highway, So you drive for like 15 to 20 minutes from the main road down a long farm stretch, and at the end is a large cul-de-sac and a surrounding massive farm. The owners of the farm have left the land kind of open to the public as a reserve because there are native trees and other things, and because about 15-minute walk from the cul-de-sac car park there is a small waterfall that you can swim in. The track is really popular as it's one of the closest swimming spots to the nearest city, Hamilton, and is really scenic. You cross footbridges, pass by creek beds, etc. The farmers still go through every now and then and do their farm work, and there is a fenced-off area that public can't enter as they still actively work the land. This particular day, my boyfriend and I were super happy because it was an empty parking lot and it was super hot for a summer day, which is very rare here. The farmer was crossing the cows through the gate on his quad as we arrived, and he smiled and waved at us. He's an older man and we've spoken before as we are regular visitors. So we set off towards the waterfall. We cross one footbridge and pass through a big paddock of cows. The track is quite narrow and the creek is right off the edge, so you have to be careful. We saw the waterfall, decided against swimming as we had no towels, and headed back towards the car park. Now, on our way back, we decided to go down a little bit of a steep gravel off-road track that led a little bit more of a private area, a bit more covered up right by the creek. Here's where it starts. We are kissing and whatnot. I was laying on my tummy reading a book, and my boyfriend was sitting up playing on his phone and was rubbing my back and playing with my hair. We were there for about 10 minutes before I turned and glanced up at the gravel path, and way up, even further on the hill through one of the farmer's gates, I saw a big man on a quad bike who I didn't recognize as one of the farmers, as there is only an old couple who work the land. He was just sitting there, staring at my boyfriend and I didn't want to think about how long he had been there before we had even noticed. I told my boyfriend, and as soon as the guy saw we were both looking at him, he opened the gate and started heading down. Now both of us immediately got up to leave as we didn't really want to have a conversation with a farmer about us getting freaky on his land, which is what we both assumed would happen, but what it was much worse. This guy came down the gravel track and ran his quad right through the creek. He left it there running in the water and got off. He was talking to himself, saying things along the line of, "Ah, fuck, I messed up my quad bike. Ah, fuck, I fucked my engine." Over and over before he even got near us. My boyfriend and I were gathering our things to leave at this point, and he starts to head towards us. He didn't even make small talk, which was really strange because he went straight into saying, "Have you guys seen any fish? I'm looking for some fish to kill." My boyfriend tells the guy there's no fish in the creek as it's fresh water and he's probably better off to catch an eel, and this sends him into a fit and he starts saying, "I don't want a fucking eel. I want to kill some fish." I had made a point not to look the guy in the eyes as I didn't want to draw the conversation towards myself because I was already extremely freaked out and I didn't want him to notice that my boyfriend is much more of the calm and stronger one when it comes to stuff like this. But for a second I did look at the guy, and I thought he looked like his face was slightly deformed, possible Bell's palsy, as I work in aged care and I've seen a bit of things that look like it and they seem similar. I bent down to tie my shoes up, and when I was standing back up, that's when I saw a pistol on the man's waist. Listen to me close now. This is my first and last time in my entire life that I have ever seen a real gun. It is incredibly hard to get firearms in New Zealand, especially after the regulations following the mass shootings in Christchurch. And not only that, he had one pistol on his belt and waved another around in his hand while talking to my boyfriend about wanting to kill some fish. He kept aiming it down at the creek and then swinging it around on his finger. My boyfriend gave me a stern look. Stern is the best word because it conveyed so much unspoken communication in that moment. He then nodded towards the gravel hill, leading back to the track. I grabbed the 2 bags we had, pretended to check my phone, and told the man our family was waiting for us at the car park. He completely ignored what I said and instead commented on my hat with something irrelevant. I excused myself and said goodbye instead of walking towards the hill. In my mind, I dreaded the possibility of looking back to see my boyfriend shot, followed by a gun pointed at me. I knew our best chance was for me to reach the top of the hill where the narrow path wouldn't allow him to ride his quad, and then sprint to the farmhouse. As I walked, the guy said to my boyfriend, "That's a pretty girl you've got there." It was like confirmation of all the bad intentions I didn't want to believe. I felt terrified. My boyfriend, however, simply said a quick, "Thank you, we'll be off now," and headed up the hill with me. The guy kept talking as if the conversation wasn't over. Even as we walked away, he stood there, gun in hand, watching us leave. As soon as we were out of sight, we sprinted all the way back to the car park. There we noticed something we hadn't seen before. Over 10 empty gun shells, bullet shells would be correct. We ran into 2 girls in bikinis just arriving at the spot. We informed them about everything and they got in their cars and left immediately. We tried to go to the farmhouse to ask if they knew the guy, as we had never seen him on the land before, but no one was home. As for the gun, it's still strange to me since I had never seen one before. These pistols looked quite old and rusty. When we discussed the incident on the way home, my boyfriend suggested that they were probably handed down to him from someone else. This incident has stayed with me for the past few years. My boyfriend and I haven't been able to return to that spot, which is a shame because that's where we had our first date, and it was a really sentimental place for us. For about a year, I had to drive past the road leading to the track while commuting between towns, and it always made me feel sick. I could have lost my life, my partner, or even worse. That day, I'm incredibly grateful that my boyfriend is such a strong man. He was able to de-escalate the situation and communicate with me through gestures during my panic state. He told me later that he was prepared to fight for our lives if necessary. Knowing the guy had been watching us beforehand and complimented me in a suggestive way made it clear that his intentions could have been very dangerous. This experience has also made me more cautious when traveling alone in the bush, something I've done my whole life. Kia ora. Kia ora everybody. Grimm here. Thank you all for coming along and listening to today's video. For those of you who don't know, kia ora is a word that can be used at the start or end of a conversation. Hence why at the end of the last story it was said, and why I say it at the beginning of every time I talk. Well, not every time, but every time I use it. I'm glad that you made it through to the end of this video. Please remember to like and subscribe, it really does help the channel out. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but every single second of communication really does boost the channel and get other people to see it. I'm not going to drag this out. I've already taken up almost 30 minutes of your time, so please, as always, be safe wherever you are, yeah? Have an amazing night or day, and I'm Grimm, and I'm, well, signing off.